Today we will be looking at powers and exponents. First, we're going to write each expression using exponents. Okay, so remember that exponents are used when we have repeated multiplication. So in this expression that we have here, we have negative 10 times negative 10 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. Okay, so we have the negative 10 multiplied by itself 2 times. And when we have a negative number and an exponent where the negative number is what's being multiplied by itself, in this case, negative 10 times negative 10, we have to make sure that we use parentheses around the base, because if you were to not, and you were to do negative 10 squared, this would be positive 10 squared, which would be 100, and then you take the negative value of that, which would be negative 100. But this is asking you to take negative 10 times negative 10, which a negative times a negative is a positive, so you would get positive 100 here. Okay, so make sure that you use parentheses anytime you have a negative base or a fraction as well, and we'll talk about that shortly. Okay, then the second number we have here that's multiplied by itself is 3. So 3 is your base, and it's multiplied by itself 5 times. So we have 3 to the 5th power. And this is your condensed version of this expression. Okay, now the next one has variables as your bases. So in this one, we have a base of x, and it's multiplied by itself 3 times. Okay, same exact process, you just use x as the base instead of a number. Okay, and then y we have once, so we write times y. And remember, when we have variables and you just write them next to each other, it automatically means multiplication, so you don't need to put the dot between your variables here. Then we have z multiplied by itself, so that's squared. And this is your simplified version of that one. And then the last one we're going to do together like this is this 2 sevenths times 2 sevenths times 2 sevenths, and then 4 times itself 3 times. So we have 2 sevenths. Again, we're going to use that parentheses, okay, because my base is the whole fraction, and it's multiplied by itself 3 times. So again, if you were to do 2 sevenths cubed, it looks like just the numerator 2 is what's being raised to the 3rd power, when in fact you want the whole fraction, 2 sevenths times 2 sevenths times 2 sevenths. It's really important that you use those fractions, those parentheses around your fractional bases, okay? And then times 4 to the 3rd power, okay, because 4 times itself 3 times. All right. Next, we're going to look at evaluating. Evaluate means you're going to find a numerical answer. Okay, these are numerical expressions. So 3 to the 3rd power is 27 minus 20. So your answer is 7. Okay. This next one has negative 4 squared minus negative 2 to the 4th power. So here you can see just the 4 is in parentheses. That means it's 4 squared, which is 16, and you're taking the negative value of that. Okay, and then minus negative 2 raised to the 4th power, and negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4, times negative 2 is going to be negative 8, and then negative 8 times negative 2 is going to be positive 16. So we have negative 16 minus a positive 16, or just minus 16, which is going to give you a negative 32. Okay, your integer rules have you add a negative, and then when you have same signs, we add them and keep the sign. So that's how we get our negative 32. Okay, then we're going to do this one. 1 to the 5th power is 1, because 1 to the power of anything multiplied by itself however many times, you're still getting 1. Okay, and then plus this 1/2 to the 3rd power. Okay, so 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 is what this wants you to do. And you multiply across the top, you get 1. Multiply across the bottom, 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8, so we get 1/8. Okay, so we get 1 plus 1/8, which is 1 and 1/8 as your number there. Okay. And then there's 3 more here that you can try on your own for that one. Okay. And then we'll do this type of problem, which gives you a value for the variable and wants you to substitute it in and then evaluate for a numerical answer. So we have a cubed plus b squared, where a is 2, so we have 2 cubed plus b, which is negative 1/3, again, using those parentheses, squared. Okay, and 2 to the third power we've talked about already is 8 plus, and then negative 1/3 times negative 1/3. So 1 times 1 is 1, and negative times a negative is a positive, and then 3 times 3 is 9. Again, that negative times a negative, so we know that our fraction here is going to be positive, and that's 1/9, which means 8, and 1/9 is our numerical answer. Okay, and then there's 2 more just like that, and then we'll look at this one together as well. It's got parentheses, and everything in the parentheses is being raised to a power. So we have x is negative 10. Again, just substituting the number that they give you for that variable into the spot for that variable, minus y, and in this case, y is negative 7. So we're going to utilize that parentheses. Okay, and this kind of is going to turn into a bracket here because all of this needs to be combined before we raise to a power, because our order of operations say parentheses first, then exponents. So we're going to do negative 10 minus negative 7. So this is going to be negative 10 plus 7. So I'm going to get negative 3 raised to the third power. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9, times negative 3 is going to be negative 27 as your solution there. Okay, and then there are 2 more that you can try on your own like that as well.